Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Vets to PM Military Transition Academy podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Misty Moreno. This podcast is dedicated to helping military service members and veterans achieve a meaningful and lucrative post-service career. We cover a wide range of topics from project management certifications to the DOD SkillBridge program and everything else in between. In today's episode, we have the privilege of hosting Adam Peters, the strategic veteran. In the first 10 minutes of this episode, Adam shares his ugly transition story and gets truly vulnerable. He opens up about the struggles he endured when his military career came to an end. After Adam shares his personal story, I ask him questions about each struggle, and he walks us through, if he knew then what he knows now, what he would have done differently. Get ready to feel all of the emotions of the military transition as you listen to this podcast. Adam will walk us through how you can be strategic in your military transition. Let's dive in. Welcome, Adam, to the show. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah. Hey, guys. My name is Adam Peters. I am otherwise known as the strategic veteran over on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you, at Vets to PM. We are consistently trying to coach and mentor veterans on how to find success in their military transition. And it's really one thing that you try to do as well. So why don't you start with a little bit about your military transition story and then take us through what you do now?
Yeah. So my transition story, man, this is where it gets ugly. 12 and a half years, 4 deployments. I came home from Afghanistan, tore a shoulder, or had a shoulder torn, got the shoulder fixed, had another surgery. Then it was decided you can't be an infantryman any longer, which really started the whole transition process. I would spend the next 18 months in the med board process. They would lose my orders in digital land somewhere or whatever, adding to frustration. And, a lot of things happened. So when I found out I couldn't be an infantryman anymore, I was crushed. So, of course, what did I do as an infantryman? I turned to the bottle, to the tune of 2 gallons of whiskey a week. So 4 half gallons of Seagram 7 in a 7-day period, not including I lived a quarter of a mile from the bar. So I would walk to the bar every night, close it down, and then come home. In addition to that, they kicked me to the curb. Basically, they sent me over to range control. And you all know, when the Army sends you to a place like that, it's a really cushy job. It's really cool. It's 3 days on, 4 days off at times, but you're not long for the Army anymore. So it's like really where good leaders go to die, because it is a privilege to get over there and you have to show some kind of responsibility and ability to lead. I was in charge of like 40 other guys running 2 shifts. But I wasn't a part of the unit anymore, but I would still have to show up over there every now and again to do some different things with the med board process, get a signature here, answer this question to the first sergeant, the commander over there. When I would go back, all of those kids that I was leading would reach out like, hey, don't leave. You can't get out. We need you. And so that kind of perpetuates the dark slide into the transition hole, if you will.
Yeah.
And so for me, 18 months in the med board process, I didn't really do anything to set myself up for civilian life. I just continued to drink, continued to wallow in it, continued to feel sorry for myself, thinking, I'll be fine when I get out. I'll figure it out just like I figured everything else out. And the day comes, and by and large, you're on terminal leave, so you're still getting paid. You're not thinking about things like that. And then the money stops, and you're truly November 2nd, 2015. I was no longer associated with the Army at all whatsoever. And then it like the first 2 weeks, you're probably like, at least for me, I was pretty excited. But then I learned at 30 years old, like any friends that you have, they're in their careers during the day. Any family that you have still to this day, still have the 9 to 5, 9 to 6, whatever. So you quickly are left to your own devices and you don't have any income, and you're like, nothing for me resonated. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea. Like, college was never for me. That's part of the reason I joined the Army. I just didn't want to go to college. Even at 30, I was really not looking to go to college. None of like the workforce up in Washington where I was at really appealed to me either. I wasn't going to go be a logger. And I'm not like uniquely qualified to do a lot of different things because, infantry, right? Like that's a problem. And so, I just kind of tried to take the ACAP advice, which was, use your GI Bill, go to school, get a degree, fill out a resume, and then hopefully you'll get hired somewhere. So that's what I did. And still really school really just didn't resonate with me. I was like, I don't want to go sit in a classroom. I don't want to learn, crap that is largely unapplicable to anything that I'm interested in life. And then I found out that the GI Bill would pay for flight school. So I did that. I went to flight school. I am a commercial multi-pilot. I have all those really awesome ratings, and I chose to walk away from it to do everything that I do now, which is, way down the road. But um, that was a challenge in and of itself because now, I'm in college with largely, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids who have zero life experience, who, pardon my language, but bitch about everything and think life is so hard with no life experience. And it was even worse than that. We had like 15, 16, 17-year-olds as well, because Washington, I'll give it to them. They do an awesome program for juniors and seniors in high school called Running Start, where they actually graduate high school with their diploma and an associate's degree. So
Oh.
good for them. But that was super challenging. And I'll never forget, I dealt with things like I would do homework while I was in the flight ops center, like sitting around waiting for weather to get better, or just trying to focus in on being in one spot, because if not, I'll just go drive around and never get any work done. So I would be in there doing kind of homework on the computers or my laptop or whatever, and they would ask me, because a lot of them would have the same gen ed classes that I did. Like, you're done with all the week's work? It's like, yeah, I choose to do this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday if necessary, so I can have
Yeah.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to myself. And that was like mind blowing to them. And then another thing I dealt with was this one lady. She didn't think that it was fair that I didn't have to pay my fair share to be at flight school,
Mhm.
and called me out on it. And I was like, I don't think you have any idea what I've given up to actually be here and have this paid for. And unlike you, daddy's money's not paying for it, because she was very vocal about daddy's money paying for it. And so just stuff like that. Um, Finished flight school, so got my AA and professional pilot, and started the bachelor's program at that same school, but they didn't know what they were doing. And this was another source of frustration, is the first quarter of that. So I wasted an entire 3 months of GI Bill. They started me on the capstone class for the bachelor's program,
Hmm.
operations management, with no foundation in operations management at all. So they didn't go well for me. I didn't like it at all. I didn't know what operations management was. I was asking questions and they're like, you should know all of this. And I'm like, you haven't been a capstone class that I
Yeah.
should have had 2 years of classes before the capstone class. So I transferred to the Evergreen State College, and I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a choose your own adventure school. It's really cool. Literally anything in their catalog you can take at any time. Now, if you want to do like a bachelor's of science, there are required classes, obviously, that you have to take to get that, that delineation on your diploma. But I really fell in love with business and psychology. And so that's primarily what I'd studied. I took 2 semesters of an audio recording kind of course where I got to play with like the mixers in an actual studio, which was kind of like I don't know, that was fun for me. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
it. So, um, and then after that, it's time to go to work. And I was managing a gun store. I had worked in a vape shop, just retail stuff, just for something to do. Plus, my friends were working at both of those places. So, like, it gave me something to do to be around them so I could largely forget about, all the crap I was trying not to think about when left on my own. And pretty quickly managing that gun shop after I finished my degree, I was like, I'm making this dude all this money and he's never here. I was working 7 days a week.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, this something's wrong. And I was doing it for 15 bucks an hour. Like, I mean, I'm doing everything from ordering inventory to stocking shelves to, managing all the inventory to payroll, everything. I was doing all of it. Like, the only thing I didn't do was Cerakote any of the guns because I wasn't certified.
Hmm.
And so part of the Voc rehab program is for 3 or 4 months after you graduate, they continue to pay you, I think it's BAH for wherever you're at. I don't remember, but while you're applying to jobs to kind of like give you a buffer between graduating
Yeah.
college and finding that career, And so I kind of approached it the same way I approached unemployment when I got out, was like, just show that you're applying to jobs, get the free money, have no intention of ever taking any of these jobs. Well, the unique stipulation for Voc Rehab is you can't refuse any interviews. And
Oh,
for whatever reason, everybody wanted to interview me, and I got caught hook, line, and sinker into the insurance world. And it was presented to me like, hey, you can be your own boss, basically own your own business. But that was about, and you can make a lot of money. Man, you really can make a lot of money in the insurance world. However, they left out a lot of things. So I
yeah.
uprooted my wife and we moved across the country to South Carolina, and I started selling final expense, knocking doors to the poorest 1/3 of Americans. And I hated it. I hated it so much. And that really started an even deeper spiral because I wasn't finding fulfillment in anything that I was doing. So I lasted about 4 or 5 months at the knocking doors job before some family issues came up, but also I was going broke. I mean, what they don't tell you about that scummy side of the insurance world is the poorest 1/3 of Americans don't have money to be buying whole life policies. So
Yeah.
as soon as you write that policy, they make the first premium payment. You get a 9-month advance on the commissions. The next month they're canceling it, and now you owe 8 months of that premium back. And it's like, how are you, like, by and large, really, I was looking at having to work for 9 months without spending any money to really make sure that I had a grasp on my finances. And, the company I worked for kind of really, I didn't really work for anybody. The one that provided the leads, they would pay for your hotels if you'd meet a certain number of threshold and premium sold for the week. But if that's not staying on the books, you're not getting your hotels paid for. So, and then you're driving. I mean, I would drive, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours away and then drive around, this giant county 4 days a week. So, you have the maintenance cost of your vehicle and gas, and just wasn't a good situation. So I left that and I took a job selling health insurance from home. That was really cool because it was like my first really endeavor into working at home. And I didn't know if I was capable of it. I didn't know if like I would kind of go out there and screw off and really not do what I was supposed to do, or if it really kind of allowed me to figure out what the work from home life really looks like and how much time you actually have between doing the assigned tasks that you have and trying to make money and like free time, if you will. And that was going well. I was making sales. Health insurance not nearly as lucrative as life insurance, but it was great because I had no commute, I had no really expense. Now the apartment's a tax write-off, right? Like, all those wonderful things until they turned off my lead money for 10 days. Well, anybody
Mm.
who's worked a pool of leads knows 10 days without putting new leads in your pipeline, you're going to run out of money really quick. So I got fed up, drove around with printed copies of my resume. Yes, I said that. And I hit every big box property and casualty store in Columbia, South Carolina. Just like walk in there, hand them a resume. Well, I would ask for the agency owner or whoever was in charge at the time. Most of the owners work in those businesses, so they're always there. I walked away that day with like 4 or 5 job offers. Chose one, kind of reneged on that, backed out of it for a better opportunity at another place. Turns out I probably should have stuck with the first one because the second one didn't work out at all. Same situation, overpromised, underdelivered. Um, and I lasted at the Allstate until November of 2021, and I was stiffed on commissions. And I was the highest selling agent in the office, and almost $6,000 are still missing from my wallet. So I left a letter of resignation on his desk, and I never went back to that industry again. Told my wife, like, hey, you gave me, X number of time. It's your turn to pick where we're going to go and live. And she's like, I really want to go to Florida. So here we are. We're in Florida. Went back to flight school to get CFI done, kind of resigned myself to the fact that, I could make a career out of flying. I didn't want to do CFI really because A, you're dependent on students for a paycheck. B, it's a lot of the same stuff for about 18 months, day in and day out, meaning I'm going to do 4 flights a day. I'm going to go do the same lesson with the same private pilot student, and I'm just going to go insane. You know what I mean? Just like
Yeah.
running circles in a square in the sky is not fun. It's just not why I wanted to fly. So I was resigned to doing that. And this is kind of the last straw that really broke the camel's back. I had done that, and I was a week away from taking the check ride so I could start working, making decent money. I mean, really decent money. They start out at 25 bucks an hour for an instructor. And if you're double
Yeah.
I, it's up to 30, and then some other things you can add. You can eventually get to about $45 an hour as an instructor, which isn't too bad. Um, I was a week away from the check ride. When I lived in Washington, they have a drug problem up there. Some tweakers had broken into my house and they stole my flight bag, which contained my logbook with all of my hours in it. So, in order to take the check ride, you have to actually fill out a form, submit it to the FAA with all of your numbers on it. So
Mhm.
I knew what numbers I had flown currently, but I needed access to my last commercial check ride so that I could match the hours because I didn't have that logbook. You would think that's something that the FAA would let live online because it's only like 300 kilobytes of data. And they do for the most part, except not my commercial check ride, my private pilot check ride. So this is the most incredible. This is red tape for you. I had to send them a handwritten letter signed with a check for $2 and like 37 cents. And I had to wait 4 to 6 months for them to send me that one piece of paper.
Wow.
So I did that, and I was willing to stick it out, and I really felt punched in the gut. And that's when a lot of the feelings of just like, why am I here? What is my purpose? It would be easier to just check out. Like, I'm not doing anybody any favors. I'm not really contributing to anything here. And I was working in the sod farms, mowing grass, which was, hindsight, it was one of the coolest jobs I've ever had because it's completely autonomous. You show up at 7 in the morning, you get your assignment, and you just put your headphones in, listen to books, podcasts, whatever that looks like for you. And you take the required breaks and you just mow grass all day. And I was like, this is pretty awesome. So I quickly found the Sean Ryan Show podcast, which
Yep.
really pushed me into finding these alternate healing modalities, specifically plant medicine. And that's when I found Heroic Hearts Project and went to Peru last July for an ayahuasca journey that completely changed my life. So that is the whole of my transition. Obviously, I didn't cover everything that happened in that 8.5 year period, but it gives you the gist of like where I was at and constantly trying different things and spinning my wheels, realizing that a lot of this stuff doesn't resonate with who I am or who I want to be.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And so knowing what you know now when it comes to infantry and, one thing that you said that stood out to me, you said, what am I going to do? I don't have any really transferable skill sets with infantry. And sometimes my husband and I joke because he's a weapons loader in the Air Force. And I always say, what is he going to do next? Like go load bombs for ISIS, right? But knowing what you know now, what are those transferable skill sets, or what should people who are in jobs like weapons and military police, infantry, those very specific jobs that have skill sets that just are mundane and repeat, what should veterans do now to prepare for their transition tomorrow?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things. The first thing, and this needs to start day one when you get into the whatever branch you're going into, start building your network. Just really, really start latching on to people who are interesting to you, who you see can benefit you in the future, and start building that network. Aside from that, understand that from the day you enter whatever branch you're going into, they are building these what I call high leverage skills in you. We all have them: leadership, adaptability, problem solving, resilience. All of these things are extremely transferable to the civilian world. And what you have to do is you have to learn how to communicate your strengths in those areas, related to the job that you did, right? So clearly the infantry, probably most known for just superior leadership, right?
Yeah.
And resiliency, because we're in it all the time. And so really learning how to take that from your time in the infantry and apply that to whatever job you're trying to apply for in the civilian world, or if you choose to go the route that I think you should go, building your own business, they automatically apply. You're already got a leg up. I think really something else too is, and this is probably the second biggest thing, is sitting with yourself and figuring out who you are.
Yeah.
Asking yourself the tough questions. Who am I outside of the infantry or the MPs or the intel world? Who am I? Who is Adam Peters? And I was reluctant to do that for a lot of years. Like, clearly with the story I told you, you can see that develop over the story, right? Whereas I do think that if we would just take that time that we're in terminal leave to really explore who we are, well, I could see myself doing this. Okay, let me take a little action on that and see if I actually like that. Nope, that wasn't for me. Now I can go back to square one, right? So
Yeah.
those are really a few of the things that I think are most important to understand about the transition and what you can do to help yourself immediately. It costs you no money. It costs you, really just time.
Absolutely. Yeah. So networking and identifying who you are outside of that career field or your uniform are really like the foundational principles of my transition. And so I would say to anybody that that's in the military now, regardless of what your career field is, there's a couple of things that you can do in order to prepare for tomorrow, whatever that may be, right? Whether it's a separation, a retirement, a medical discharge, or even just a discharge in general. Number one, make your military career a part of your life and not your life. And obviously we have a contract and there's obviously a different level of commitment that is expected out of military members, but there is, an opportunity to make your career a part of your life and not your life. And how do you do that? Number two, get some hobbies, discover who you are. What do you like to do? And then number three, build your community, which goes in line with networking, right? And so when you're making your career a part of your life, not your life, you're getting hobbies and you actually are creating that life, that is conducive not only for the military, but for the civilian sector. And you're building a community around you that will help you when which you probably undoubtedly will, endure some struggles when you transition. So I do appreciate you sharing your story about your, substance abuse and stuff like that. And unfortunately, we have a lot of experience with our friends, our peers, and we've talked about this before, when this is their, stress reducing outlet. And it's obviously not very positive for the mental, transition and just physically. So again, knowing what you know now, because this is what we do, right? We learn the hard way. So what can veterans who are transitioning do to deal with stress instead of maybe going down the unhealthy, unproductive road of substance abuse?
Well, the first thing you can do is open your mind to the fact that you have to ask for help. If you're not going to ask for help, it's going to get rough for you, I promise. I was raised, if you will, in an army where asking for help obviously would cost guys their careers. So it was foreign to me to ask for help. Beyond that, all the woo-woo stuff that people don't want to think work, right? Like learning how to sit with yourself, meaning learning how to feel those emotions that you're trying to hide from. Stop running away.
Yeah.
Stop running away. That's the biggest, I think the biggest thing is, like, we go into fight or flight mode because we're losing the most familiar thing in our lives. And that comes with, Pandora's, quote unquote, Pandora's box being opened, and you not knowing how to deal with all of that. And really the best way to deal with it is to feel the anger, feel the sadness, feel the pain, like really sit with that and understand where it's coming from, explore it, and kind of go on that journey with yourself. I really think that that's super important. And I don't know how to get people to understand that, because it's just so, the antithesis of what society has taught us to do our whole lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, reality has it that most veterans actually don't, get medically discharged and aren't discharged from the military. Most veterans they choose to separate prior to, to having to, and they choose to retire just like myself prior to having to. And so if you're in that boat, meaning you're choosing to separate and you're choosing to retire, prior to really having to, then your why are you getting out, should really drive you through the future.
I
Now, if you're in
100% agree with
your
you.
boat, like if you're in your boat, medical discharge or just a regular discharge, that's a little different, right? But if you're choosing to separate, then your why, as far as, for me, it was so I would have choices and I would not have to be away from my husband and my son for years at a time. And
Mhm.
regardless of what people say, a year is a very long time. So
A
I did
long
not
time.
want to be away from my husband and my son that long. So I had a choice. And it's important to understand what that why is. Now, for people who are being medically discharged or discharged in general, I like to do this little exercise with, veterans that I mentor. And it's just every single morning when you wake up, get into a space where you just journal for whether it's 5 or 10 minutes or however long you want to. And you just journal everything that you want to say, that you want to do, whatever's on your mind. So that way you're releasing it, even though you're releasing it to, paper, it should still feel like you've let it out,
Yeah.
right? And
Oh
so
yeah.
we have to come up with some sort of stress reducing techniques that hopefully will lead us away from the unproductive and even the damaging ones like substance abuse.
Yeah, for sure. Something else I like to give to people when they come to me and they're really worried about it. It's as simple as like the first thing you should do in the morning when you wake up is say out loud 5 things you're grateful for.
Yeah.
A gratitude practice when you wake up first thing in the morning makes it really, really hard to have a bad day. And then if you take that and move that straight into, like you said, journaling down your thoughts, really just a stream of consciousness. Nobody ever has to read it. I know, there's some people who think that burning it actually gives it more power, down the road. So that, but what I found when I actually practice journaling is a lot of the thoughts that spin out of control in my head will disappear completely. So you can eliminate them that way as well. So now you're actually clear minded. And I don't know all the studies, but there is a link between brain and hand writing things on
Absolutely.
paper that like they've done a bunch of studies on this, and the cognitive effects are just ungodly, out of this world, elevated when you actually pick up practices like this.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So then you went into, life insurance and health insurance. And so again, looking back, I am a big advocate for you either learn, you earn, or you learn and earn when you take on a job, right? So you can learn new skill sets, you can upskill, whatever it may be. You earn money, and maybe that's, kind of your ticket out of that career field or whatever it may be. But ideally, you want to learn and earn. So
Yeah.
now looking back, what did insurance selling and healthcare selling, what did you learn?
Uh, so many
Good
lessons.
things, Adam. Like
Yeah,
what?
so many lessons. I mean, I
Okay.
learned a lot of bad lessons, a lot of hard lessons to
Yeah.
learn in that, but I really a foundation for everything that makes me work today in the business world, right? Like I learned how to sell. So I gained the sales skills. I learned
Yeah.
the power of follow up. I learned what it is to manage your own, books when you have it's completely different from personal finance to business finance, because not only do you now have to kind of eat off of that money, but you also have
Yeah.
to fund the business off of that money. So maintenance and, gas in my situation, and, the paper to print the lead cards on that we were using, so I learned all of that. But I genuinely learned that I truly enjoy helping people.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I had such a terrible experience in the side of insurance that I was on, because it was the very scummy side, taking advantage of people and not helping people. And if we have time, I have a particular story. I was in rural, very rural North Florida, South Georgia, like kind of on the line, right by pretty much where Helene just destroyed.
Yeah.
And I had this lead card, and I knocked on this woman's door, and she wheels herself to the door. She's blind. She's in her 70s, 80s. I don't know. She has no legs, and she's stuck in a wheelchair, dirt poor. And she just begged me to just sit with her and talk. And she told me the story of how her kids treat her, how they only show up once every 2 weeks to take her Social Security check. And they leave her
Wow.
with minimal groceries and no cigarettes. Now, mind you, cigarettes aren't good for you, but like this woman's in her 80s.
Yeah,
She's got
like
nothing,
let her live, right?
and I think I sat there the rest of my day and just had a conversation with her. And I think that had a huge impact on me. And it wouldn't I wouldn't realize it until a little over a year later when I would go to the ayahuasca retreat. But that really kind of influenced everything and what I do now, trying to help veterans transition better, like what you do. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I learned is there's a lot of joy in being selfless and helping others.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, let's recap that because I think that what we just discussed is really pivotal. So when it comes to any sort of military transition, regardless if you're separating or retiring by choice, or maybe the choice is being made for you through a medical discharge or just a normal discharge, whatever it is, there are some things that we can do in the service in order to get prepared for our time out of the service. And one of the things that you shared with us is networking, and then really just kind of discovering who you are. And so that's what anyone can do right now. So I always say it's never too early and it's never too late to start preparing for your military transition. And so when you're in the service, start getting a life, right? What are your hobbies? Maybe, I had side hustle after side hustle when I was in the service, and I learned a lot from those things. Create a community, people that are in the military, but mostly people that are out of the military that can provide you maybe a different perspective or, really just help you increase your network. Because I always say your network is really your net worth, like who you can lean on, deposit into your network so you can withdraw at times, and then really just make the career, your military career a part of your life, not your life. That doesn't mean that, that you're not 100% dedicated, whatever. Work-life balance is 100% a fallacy. Like it just doesn't exist. You have to create it,
Yep.
whatever that means to you. So those are some things that you can do, while you're serving. And then we need to look for ways to reduce our stress, regardless of how smooth and successful a military transition is. People always say to me, "Oh, you're so lucky you didn't go through anything."
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yes, like
Yeah,
everybody
exactly.
goes through stuff. It's just different. Just like you said, like, I've worked really hard on my mental transformation in order to prepare for when I do, experience some adversity. So have some sort of stress management techniques, maybe it's journaling, whatever it is, right? And then any job that that you take, you can learn or you can earn or you can do both. And so a lot of those skills that you might learn in those jobs that you don't like and maybe suck the soul out of you still are valuable for what you can do in the future. So let's talk about Adam. So, you told us, hey, we have to get to know who we are. And so 8.5 years later, who is Adam Peters?
Well, he's somebody that loves and respects himself first and foremost, who realizes that he's capable of more than I ever thought possible, but a lot more than anybody else in my life ever gave me credit for. So I think that's like point number one.
Mhm.
And point number two is I'm a member of a community that's killing itself. And I had to step up and do something about it and not just 22 push-ups or whatever that looks like on a social media campaign.
Yeah.
And to be honest, when I started, I had no idea what that looked like, but I knew that if I took action, it would inform me of everything down the road. So I'm just a guy who wants to improve everyone's life in some way, shape, or form as best as I can. And I get so much joy out of helping people do that. You, for example, when you reached out to me to come on your show, you referred to me as a bigger creator, and we're not in a spot to get bigger creators. And I was like, that is not me at all. Like, I'm not that guy. Like, I'm just a guy who genuinely wants to help people. And it's been so much fun to do this. I can't say that I don't make money now because I make a little bit of money, but it's not nearly enough to pay any bills. I'm still in the, operating in the
Yeah.
negative. So it's not a problem. Like, I just want to help people. I get joy out of working with, these transitioning veterans who are spiraling and they're struggling. And I get to give them some of my knowledge, and then they keep coming back and like, hey man, like I want you to know what you've done for me has actually really helped me. And it's like, that's really all I care about. So that's who I am. And that's really my life's work has become helping veterans. That's it.
Yeah, and at Vets to PM, we always say, we help veterans achieve a meaningful and lucrative post-service career. But the important thing is that you have to define what meaningful and what lucrative means. It
Yeah.
doesn't always mean being, a super military influencer and people are following you and you're getting all this. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're bringing, six figures in. And so what does meaningful and lucrative mean to you?
So my end goal is to have control of all of my time, meaning
Yeah.
whenever I want to go do something, no matter how long that period of time is, I'm in a place where everything that I've built will sustain itself so that I can just do that. And nobody's going to tell me when, where, how, ever again. And then on the financial side, it really just looks like to me, within reason, not having to check the bank account when I go somewhere and want to swipe the card for, for this. And I'm a pretty like, I don't know, I'm a cheap guy. I don't need lavish, expensive things. I mean, like there are several expensive things that I want and I will get over time, but by and large, they're not really that expensive. They're not really out of reach. So for me, just, if I want to go to Europe next week and spend a week there, I want to be able to just swipe the card for the plane tickets, book the hotel, and not have to look at the bank account because I know that whatever's coming in plus whatever's going out equals I can do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
then,
always say, I tell my husband all the time, nowadays being rich means you can go to the grocery store and not worry about how much stuff is because it's increased so much and not
yeah,
worry about going to get gas and whatever it may be. Yes. So as a veteran, it's important for us, while we're in the service, but especially when we are transitioning, that we define what meaningful and what lucrative means to us. So then that way we can sort of navigate the path that's going to help fulfill those definitions. Doc Wright, our founder, he always says that veterans just need to do something that makes them feel like they matter and they're
yes,
making a difference. And so
100%.
let's talk a little bit about what you do now for veterans to help them find success in their military transition.
Yeah. So, first thing, the podcast, the Strategic Veteran Podcast, I started that. Funny story. I'm not the guy that is going to get his message across behind a keyboard and posting words on a social media platform. So, had a mentor convince me to start the podcast, and I've run with it. But the idea behind the podcast is to bring on veteran entrepreneurs, talk about a little bit of their military career, what inspired them to join, their transition, and kind of why their path back to purpose was through entrepreneurship, because I really genuinely believe that. And so we've done, I think I have almost 70 in the bank right now.
Wow.
We've released 23 or 24, trying to get to the point where we can release 2 a week so that, the conversations aren't so old and stale, but, either way, like kind of grinding there. And then from that, I started the Stronghold, which is it's a paid community. Sorry, guys, nothing's free in this world. But, I wanted to create a place for a community, like you said, for a lot of veterans I talk to are like, I get the whole I can't do this alone, but I don't know where to find people who who kind of get it, who think like you and whatever. I was like, well, let me create that place. And I created it out for several reasons, but the main reason is because I hate Facebook groups. And I've got a history with Facebook groups. When I was in flight school learning instruments, right, I would ask questions and I would get destroyed by people with 20, 30 years in the industry. They would just rip me to shreds. And I think the bigger picture there is what that actually does to somebody who's interested in the industry. It's a turnoff to the industry because it's a foreshadowing of, okay, so when I get to the airlines or I get that job flying private jets, I don't feel like I can ask quality questions to level up my understanding of the task at hand. And so it's the same in any veteran group. Go look. I dare you to go look. It'll make
Oh,
you
yeah.
sick at what some of these people are talking about in there. I did a post, I think, last month on LinkedIn where I took a screenshot. And of course, I'm not going to dime anybody out. I'm not going to put anybody on blast. I blacked his name out. But this guy just made a post in one of the, I think it was Operation Iraqi Freedom Veterans Group. Like, shut that F up if you haven't deployed, or if you didn't do 20 years, then you're not retired. And it's like, well, hey, bud, my ID card says something completely different. And so do all my benefits. And oh, by the way, you made it to 19 years, so you're not retired either. And I have more benefits than you. So who's the winner here? You know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
could be petty about that. But so the stronghold is, it's a place where, the primary function of it right now is we have daily posts in there, and those daily posts, and you're getting the news here because nobody in the community knows this, but they're really geared at getting you out of the fixed military mindset and putting you into a growth mindset. So, there are questions in there to this day that make me think really, really hard and have to sit with myself, my thoughts and my emotions to actually give a positive answer. And then we've got workshops in there. It's very member driven. So I don't want to build anything, any fluff, whatever the members say they want is what we will put in there. So one of the big things was networking. I did a really awesome networking class that was so well received. I had field grade officers that were like, this is one of the best spends on networking I've ever heard. You know what I mean? We're running an AI automations workshop this week. So tomorrow night, join the Stronghold. Doors open again tomorrow. But running AI automations, introduction to AI automations for your business. We've done a mastermind where one of the guys in there had a bunch of questions about how he can move his business forward. And we all came together as a group and gave him actionable, awesome advice. There's people in there that are talking about their transition woes and all the things that they're struggling with, and they get support and they get actionable advice. They don't get ripped to shreds. They don't get brought down for being vulnerable. And that's the place that I wanted to create. Where is it going? I don't know. I have no idea. And I think that's the fun part, because as we get more members, there's going to become a need for more things, and I don't know what those things are. Like I
Yeah.
can't know what you need. All I can know is what I would have needed, but why waste time building that if that's not what's going to help you now? So, and then from there, who knows what's going to come? I'll do some one-on-one coaching with you, but I'm not cheap, mainly because I value my time. So if you want one-on-one coaching, prepare to open your wallet. I'll be
Mhm.
upfront with you guys on that one. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's what we're doing with the Stronghold. I encourage anybody who's transitioning and interested in entrepreneurship specifically to join. You don't have to be interested in the entrepreneurship route. I'd love to have any veteran who's struggling in their transition just come. And I don't think a lot of us understand how much value there is in sharing those stories.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you're creating a community that others can join, that's going to provide them some actionable tips and tools to help them with, not only their military transition, but also with the transformation that has to take place after you do the logistics, right? The resume, the interview, find out where you're going to live, whatever it may be. So, and I believe that that's where a lot of veterans struggle, is that transformation piece. You mentioned something about, I do individual coaching and I pay, and, I know my worth. I wanted to make a note on that, because one thing that I hear a lot, especially because I'm the one that answers the phone for Vets to PM, and I answer the emails, and I mentor a lot of veterans, and, we're always asked for discounts or whatever it may be, right? But, and that's fine. That's, hey, I always, when I go into Nike, I'm like, hey, do you take do you have a military discount, whatever it may be? But, in the civilian sector where I worked for 4 years, people are paying for their own education. People are paying for their own trainings, right? People are doing things behind the scenes in order to level up, upskill, whatever it may be. And we're also the same community that says, pay me what I'm worth. I'm worth 6 figures, or I'm worth this or that. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to kind of, input this tip there, is like, when other veterans are charging, or veteran organizations, for-profit organizations are charging, we have to remember too, like, they're worth that as well, right? And we should pay their worth. And so if we're going to preach that we're worth this or that, we also need to remember that the people that are out there making a living, doing something other than being in the military, they're worth it as well. So I just wanted to put that in there. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that that's spot on. And I'll take it even further, right? Like, you have to have some skin in the game to actually get useful knowledge
Oh,
and
yeah.
actionable intel out of anything that you do. If I give you stuff for free, you will never take action on it. A little bit more to that, like if you have a problem with me having a for-profit business catered at veterans, well, then I would challenge you to take a harder look at me, because I also volunteer about 30 or 40 hours a week of my time to a nonprofit that's
Yeah.
for veterans. So, if you want to come at me sideways about, charging veterans for other things, I would say take a long, hard look in the mirror, because something about you is not willing to invest in yourself. My community's $50 a month. I know you're wasting $50 a month on random shit that doesn't matter. I promise. you know and then I would challenge you to ask yourself in that same, while you're looking in the mirror, what are you doing for veterans that you get to be pissed off at me because I'm charging veterans on a for-profit side, but also
Yeah,
doing nonprofit work over here?
absolutely.
Like, don't point the finger, because you got four more pointing right back at you.
Yeah, and you post a lot and you talk a lot about how veterans are helping other veterans in your community. So, let's get on to that topic. So, us veterans, how can we help other veterans? We're recording this podcast on September 30th, so we're closing out the Suicide Awareness Prevention Month, and you and I both have been impacted by suicide, peers, whatever it may be, colleagues, comrades and stuff like that. And so people ask me all the time, like, how do you keep your head up when, you're maybe experiencing a wave of sadness or PTSD or whatever it may be? And I just truly believe, like, if you help other people, then that will help you. So
100%.
I just get such an adrenaline rush and, like a natural high. I don't need alcohol. I don't need anything. When I'm helping other people, that's why, I'm always available to review resumes, do mock interviews. Now, because people do lean on me, obviously I have to limit it to like 10 minutes, and I can do a lot in 10 minutes when it comes to a resume review or a mock interview. But when I help others, that in turn helps me. And it helps me, dig my heels in and navigate the wave of sadness, because no one ever said that life was going to be simple or easy, especially life after the military. But the goal is that we're as resilient as we say we are, that
Yep.
we're as adaptable as we say we are, that we're as flexible and agile as we say we are. So why don't you give us some tips and tools on how veterans can help veterans?
Well, again, the first thing you need to do is take a long, hard look in the mirror and understand why you actually joined whatever branch of the military you joined.
Yeah.
We all say it was for college money or for travel, or any one of 100 other reasons to get out of small town America. But I have a philosophy that it's the universe called us to serve something bigger than ourselves. Period. End
Yeah.
of story. And we lose sight of that through our careers, or particularly GWAT, when you start finding out a lot of the stuff we know now about what GWAT was, or
Yeah.
whatever, so we get jaded. But we lose sight of that when we get out, because we're wrapped up in the identity of that, and we don't realize that genuinely serving something bigger than yourself, like you were saying, helping people, actually fills our cup up. So instead of being a part of the problem, instead of being an entitled veteran who wants somebody to do it all for them, get off your ass, get out there and make something happen for yourself. I don't care. The story last week was at the gas station filling up my wife's truck, because we all know here that I don't own a car right now because I work from home and it's an expense I don't need. But I was filling up my wife's truck, just being a good husband, because I had borrowed it. And somebody at the gas station, like, just out of his mind, like had driven from somewhere up north, was on his way to about an hour south of me, and was like, "Hey man, can you like spare $20 so I can put gas in my car to make it down to Sebastian?" And I'm like looking at him, I'm like, "I usually don't do this, and then he was like, "Dude, like, honestly, I just left my wallet at home." He's like, "Would you please help me?" I filled his tank up, and I felt great about it. I was having a pretty bad day at that point, and this was the end of the day, and I was like, let me just help the guy out, whether he's bullshitting me or not. Like, let me just help him out. And when I filled his tank up and he shook my hand and gave me a hug and said, "Dude, you're a lifesaver. Thank you so much. How can I ever repay you?" I was just like, "Don't worry about it, man. You already have." You
Yeah.
know, That's a place you can start too. If you're feeling bad about yourself, go out there and just help somebody. I don't care what it looks like. Help an old lady get something off the top shelf if you're tall at the grocery store, or buy that person who's struggling to find the next credit card that they can put their groceries on, pay for their groceries, and come back to me and tell me how great you'll feel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's really, I think, where you should start.
Yeah. So, I had a yep, podcast, good Lord, podcast guest on, and he said that first we need to start inside our home and start, making sure that we are, because our families and I mean, everyone and anything is going through the transition as a whole too, right? And so as much as the veteran itself may be struggling, the family itself may be enduring a struggle. So first start in your home, help the people in your home, be a strong, nuclear family, whatever that looks like. And I just mean whoever you take care of or you do life with, make sure that you guys are a strong unit and you have each other to rely on. And then go outside of your community, and he said too, like, you don't have to go and volunteer for, veterans organizations, whatever it may be. That's a good place, but you can also start in your neighborhood. If you see trash, pick it up. If if whatever it may be, if you see a lawn that's overgrown, maybe knock on the door and ask if you can help. We used to do a lot of this in the military. And one of those things that we used to say too is like, I wish I could just volunteer, like doing things that I want to do. Like I would say it all the time, like, you're never going to find me at Habitat for Humanity because I don't like painting or don't like building, right? But what do I like to do? I love reviewing resumes and interviews. I love going to schools and talking, whatever. So start in your home and then work outside in your neighborhood, in your community, whatever it may be. Whatever helps you, just like you said, whatever fills your cup, help that way. Whatever skill set you have, help that way,
I would even argue just go have conversations with
Yeah.
strangers, because in May to October, a little over what is that? That's 5 months. With the
Making me do math
podcast.
in public.
Yeah, I know. It's terrible. But in 5 months, I've had so many conversations, and the one takeaway from that is conversations heal.
Yeah.
Conversations heal. Like, just some of my favorite social media things of all time are people who just put a lawn chair in their front yard with a sign that says, in this case, it was, I'm a black guy. I want to talk to white people. Let's have a conversation, a real
Yeah.
conversation. Leave all the crap out of it. I'm a struggling veteran. I want to talk to you. Let's have a conversation. It's a simple sign that you could put out there. I had a buddy when he got out of the Army, he went to downtown Seattle, free hugs.
Yeah.
Free hugs. And that's how he got himself better. You know what I mean? Like, use your damn imagination. Like, really, I think all of this involves spending some time with yourself, and we're really good at not doing that.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think we're actually probably better than most. And
We're
so,
way better than most. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
At Vets to PM, we have this career transition workbook, and it helps you identify your sort of like what you loved doing in the military, what you didn't like doing. And that really helps you identify those things that maybe you want to do, in the future in the civilian sector. And I always go a step further. I always say, okay, when you were in the military and you were thinking about the things you wanted to do, the life that you wanted to live, the job that you wanted to have, or if you ever said like, oh, I can't do that because I'm in the military, write those things down and then come up with a plan on how you're going to do those things. My friend Ashley retired as well as a master sergeant. And a couple of years later, she said, I'm finally doing what I said I was going to do, when I first put in my retirement paperwork. So today, she actually leaves and she's going to go camping with her dog in Maine. So she lives in Pennsylvania. And she said, I don't necessarily always want to do it. She's one that says, I just posted about her actually. She said, I don't necessarily want to live every day, but I don't want to die either. So my desire to not die is greater than my desire to not live. And that's, to me, like, that's where I need to be. And she said, so I don't necessarily want to do this, but I'm going to do this because I know it's going to make me feel better. I've never regretted a trip, and just like you said, you're never going to regret helping someone. But when you're still in the military, that is when, and we can kind of bring this conversation around, that's when we should identify our transferable skill sets. If you're not already doing it, start performance tracking. Even if you were in infantry, intel, military police, whatever it may be, start performance tracking. And then, start creating these healthy habits to reduce stress, right? And not to, everyone has, for the most part, unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that are turning to unhealthy things for stress management. The best thing about you is that you identified it and, you took positive steps to maybe get out of that habit, you know what I mean? But identify your transferable skill set, create some healthy habits when it comes to stress management. And then no matter what you're doing, regardless if you're getting a new career for 20 years once you separate or retire, or you're going from job to job, what are you learning? What skills are you developing? Just like what you said, you learned how to have conversations, communicate, and then it's time to start giving back and start helping other veterans. So as we close out, Adam, again, thank you for sharing your story. We always like to highlight, the good, the bad, the indifferent. Sure, we can highlight people who are kicking butt every day, of their military transition, but your story and several others that we've shared is really representative of what people, experience when it comes to the military transition. So for 8.5 years, you struggled to sort of find your way and find yourself. And so any last rounds, what are some tips and tools that veterans can take from this podcast right now and execute it tomorrow?
I think the first thing is remember that you are allowed to pursue whatever your gut tells you should be pursuing. You're not bound to society's standards of what you should be doing. Nobody can make that decision for you but you. So right off the bat, try to ignore the write a resume, use your GI Bill, go to college, get a good career, because that doesn't resonate, as I'm finding, with a lot of people. It really doesn't.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, that's a really good point. You don't have to, like, that's what I tell my friend Ashley all the time. She's like, I work at Lowe's. I'm like, yeah, you don't need a big girl job. So she calls my job a big girl job. And she's like, yeah, I don't want a big girl job. And I'm like, you don't have to. If you financially and mentally can swing it, then yeah, but go ahead.
I would say the second thing is understand that this is not something that's going to happen overnight. You're hearing from a guy who's been working on himself since July of last year, like pretty hard, like down the rabbit hole of, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, all that breath work, all that good stuff, all those healing modalities that I use, that I teach, that I want everybody to know. I practice these daily for the last over a year. You know what I mean? So, in that, don't look at everybody else, because what you're not seeing, for me, like, for example, if you look at any of my social posts, you'll see I have almost 5,000 followers and I'm bringing in a little bit of money a month and I've created all these things. What you didn't see is the last 10 months of grinding and how none of that had any traction when I started. And you didn't see what went into it, all the late nights, the 7 a.m.s to the 10 p.m.s, right? Like, so understand that everybody's journey is their own and that you need to stop comparing yourself to other people, right? Don't look at me and say, oh, well, he did all these things. Okay, you can do all these things too. You just have to start and stop making excuses for yourself, because that's the first thing that happens. And then the last thing is, for the love of God, when you get out, don't stop doing PT. Don't, because I believe that's the very first thing we all cut out. And that is the first domino falling.
I love that. Yeah, because and I'll be honest with you, I struggled with it for a little bit. Now, I didn't stop PT altogether, but I honestly was struggling with, okay, well, I don't have to run anymore. Like, I don't have to do push-ups. Like, what do I even like to do? So for 20 years, I'm like, all I did was really run and do push-ups and sit-ups, because for me, I had to train specifically in order to do well on my PT tests and stay fit, because I love to eat. So I had to find out, like, what it was that I actually liked to do when it came to fitness. Another thing that I had to figure out was, what kind of environment do I actually like to work in? 4 years later, so I've been out for 4 years, I realize now I do not like a high-paced environment. I do not like ops tempo. I don't like a stressful, no, I do not thrive.
I
I
live for
had to
that.
thrive, right? I had to thrive for 20 years. And so when I was at Continental Tire, it wasn't until the third year where I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't like being stressed all the time. And so then that way, I made a change. And so I always tell veterans, and I think that you can relate too, is like, you're still very militarized when you separate, retire, or you discharge. It's going to take you probably 4, 7, 9, 11 years to identify what it is that you actually like and
Mhm.
who you actually are. And so this is why my biggest piece of advice is just take it year by year, 1 year at a time. Let it go through the complete evolution of a year, right? Because you can learn a lot in a year. Like you know what I mean? Like you don't get to really see the full effect until you've been in it for a year, until your feelings can develop and your skill sets can develop. So the best thing about when you're not, quote unquote, contracted or owned by the government is that you have some choices and you can ride this out for a year and just see what it is that you actually want to do.
Well,
So,
that's such good advice because one of my favorite quotes, and I'll probably get this wrong, so it's not a direct quote. I'm just going to adapt it to kind of the way I think. We overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, and we severely underestimate what we can accomplish in 5 years. I think that was originally 5 years,
yeah.
10 years, but I think it's true. It all applies. And, here's the deal. Like the best piece of advice I can give you is when you're transitioning out and you're looking to try and discover who you are, don't spend too much time on the thing that doesn't resonate with you. If you're not
Woo!
genuinely happy to get out of bed and go do what you want to do every single day or what you're supposed to do every single day, you're on a road to failure. And that applies to, I understand not everybody's in my position with no kids and just a wife and two dogs or whatever. They got families to support. I understand that. I totally get it. I totally get it. But that doesn't mean you can't bounce from job to job until you find the one that resonates with you so that you can pay the bills.
Yeah.
Like, don't do something just because you think this is the only way, like out of desperation, I guess is what I'm saying. Don't take that corporate job and be miserable every single day. The second you're miserable, leave, just leave. You
Yeah.
don't need to be respectful. You don't need to give them 2 weeks. Just leave. You're allowed to do that. You're
Yeah. You have
absolutely
choices
allowed to
now.
do that.
Regardless, you have choices. Like Ben Bergeron, I don't know if you know him, but he's a
You.
big CrossFit coach and he wrote a couple books and I love him. But I was reminded, by him like this weekend, someone on one of my posts, and unfortunately she comments all the time. And so she's very negative, you could just tell that she's struggling with whatever it is. But he always says, like, you have a choice. If you don't like the weather, then you can move. And of course, the first thing that people are going to say is, well, no, because my job, regardless, you have a choice. You're choosing to stay, right, in that weather that you don't like. And so her comment was, I'm not financially capable of saying no at my job and leaving and blah, blah, and creating these boundaries.
You are.
And I wanted to reply back and say, you actually are.
You are.
You're just choosing not to. And so it's not as extreme, but about 3 years into my journey at Continental, I just realized that I was no longer a good fit for that company. That company was amazing, 100% set me up for success, compensated me beautifully, respected me, and I learned so much and met the best people. But I was outgrowing it very similar to how I outgrew the military. It was at 19 years where I was like, oh yeah, I don't want to do this anymore, right? So 3 years into my journey at Continental, I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead for a year, create some options, figure this out, identify what I want to do, because I don't know what I want to do just yet, but I know that this is not going to be my future. And you have a choice, regardless of what your financial situation is, whatever, you have a choice. It's maybe a little bit more difficult for people who don't have a retirement like myself and disability like myself, but you have a choice. And when it comes down to the military transition, we all have choices, right, Adam?
Well, so I just want to add to that because I think
Yeah.
that's very well said. And had she commented on my post with something like that, I would have said what you wouldn't say. But
Yeah.
by and large, really what it comes down to is you're afraid to take the hard choice. And my finances don't allow me to. That's a hard choice. That's a hard choice. And the difference between you and me is I made the hard choice. I took the chance on myself with no safety net, with a runway of whatever I had in the bank account, and this is what it is, right? So, uh, the excuse, I can't, shouldn't exist in vocabulary because it's simply a matter of making a hard choice. And I've been there. I've been where you are. I've had no money because remember, I deployed 4 times from
Yeah.
the beginning of my career to the end of my career. So finances were not something I was really worried about keeping up with. I didn't think I was coming home. So,
Yeah.
I did. I made the choice. I was like, I'm not going to work for people my entire life and have somebody dictate that I have to take PTO to go to a VA appointment or, I can't do something because it's inconvenient for you. Uh,
Yeah.
that's not worth it to me. I'd rather struggle financially and sacrifice. I mean, it really all comes back to delayed gratification and what are you willing to sacrifice? I think Hormozy just put out a post the other day. If you
Yeah, he did.
write down all the things that you're not willing to sacrifice, and
Yep.
he'll show you the difference between you and the successful person that you want to be. Because that successful person will make the hard choice and sacrifice literally that entire list of things.
Absolutely. And one important note too is like, you don't have to achieve. You don't have to rise to the occasion. You don't, you can wake up and be mediocre if you choose to do that. The
Yeah.
difference is that like for me, and this is a very maybe trivial example, but I absolutely love candy. I love food, Adam. I love food. Absolutely love food. I work out. I really do. But I look like I love food. I look like I work out, but that I love food, right? And so someone said to me, someone said to me the other day, and she's a good friend of mine, and she was like, if you didn't eat so much, you'd probably have a six pack and look like that you worked out. And I looked at her and I said, but what kind of fun would that be in
Yeah.
life? Like, so my point is that just like what you said, stop paying attention to society, whatever society is telling you that this is what you should do once you transition from the military. The beauty of transitioning from the military is now you do have a choice. Yes, there's circumstances and situations that may impact your choice, but you have a choice and you can live your best life. And if you want to wake up, scroll social media, read all day, whatever it may be, as long as you are not complaining that the world is this and the world is that and that I'm the victim and whatever, you can live your best life. You can absolutely live your best life. And I think my superpower is that I feel like I've already achieved in the military. So I don't feel like I need to achieve anymore. At 46, I have a husband. We retired happily married. An 18-year marriage in the military is pretty darn good. We have a child that is like, I would say 99% mentally healthy, good to go, like doesn't have any, well, what we know, right? But yeah, so you get to choose. You're on this military transition. And if you want to identify your skill set, validate it, get a resume, get an interview, and go get a big girl or a big boy job, cool. If you want to go and start a podcast and help other veterans, cool. If you want to do nothing because you don't have to financially, cool. The best thing is that on your military transition, you get to choose and you get to start living and enjoying the freedoms that you protected, so long for all of us to do so. So,
You get
Adam,
a
it was
chance
great
to
to
reinvent
go
yourself.
ahead. Go
You get
ahead.
a chance to reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
Like how many people in life really get a solid opportunity to pivot away from one thing? Your case, you did it for 20 years. I did it for 13, right? Like
Mhm.
that very much becomes in the civilian world, like who you are and what you're going to do for the rest of your
Oh,
life.
yeah.
How many people get to pivot and really, like you said earlier, sit with all of those things you said you wish you could have done or wished you could have been or wish you would have signed up for or whatever when you were in the military. Well, go do them now. Go do
Yeah,
them now.
absolutely. Go live your best life. Go help others. And yeah, just remember we only get one life to live. And as you and I, we both have, friends and colleagues and comrades that, no longer are living. And when I wake up and I am having maybe a particularly sad day or bad day, whatever the definition of that is, I just remember, the people that they're no longer here to live. And so I'm going to do what I can to live my best life because they've fought really hard for me to do so. So Adam, it's great to have you on the podcast. Where can we connect with you? Where can people find you? And how do they get involved in how you're helping others, successfully transition from the military?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is at thestrategicveteran.com. If you don't want to go to the website, the only place you're going to get in touch with me on social media is LinkedIn, because I'm terrible with the other ones. Really like them. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can't miss me. Adam Peters, 2 little salute emojis next to my name. And I still handle all my DMs and comments and posts and all of that. So you will be talking to me. You will not be talking to a virtual assistant or a chatbot.
Awesome. And before we leave, one thing that you say is that, you're here to help others find success in the military transition. So 8.5 years later, all these trials and tribulations, that obviously makes up your story now. What does success mean to you?
Saving lives. We accomplished that before the first episode of the podcast had come out. I had a kid that I used to mentor in the Army call me right before we released the first episode and said he was leaving a VA inpatient treatment program for trying to kill himself. And he saw the post on LinkedIn and said, "You never steered me wrong in the military, so you won't steer me wrong out here." And I knew I had to follow you. So genuinely, I've already achieved success, I guess. I've learned so much about myself. I've, by and large, really ingrained in the healing journey and continue to work on that every day. And I saved a life, and that's really all I care about. Beyond that, whatever this turns into, it's just bonus points.
Absolutely. And I think that you've really just defined what meaningful and lucrative means. So Adam, thank you so much for what you do for our community. Thanks for sharing your story and your tips and tools. And I'll be sure to make sure that everybody knows where to find you. But from one veteran to another, thanks for helping me and thanks for helping other veterans.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm super grateful and honored to be here. And like I said, I'll help anybody. I don't care.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Military Transition Academy podcast. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it with your fellow veterans and friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Please connect with Adam Peters on LinkedIn. Also, ensure that you have subscribed to the Vets to PM LinkedIn newsletter and access free resources at vets2pm.com/training. In order to start your military transition, Vets to PM is your resource. We provide hope when it comes to the military transition. Take care and talk to you soon.